The way she looked at me that night, cold, distant, as if I were nothing more than a stranger, was the moment I knew. What? When the fight started months ago, not when she began pulling away, not even when I found myself sleeping on the far edge of the bed, wondering when the warmth between us had disappeared. No, it was that look. It was the moment she stood in front of everyone, her expression unreadable, and said the words that changed everything. Listen or leave. The restaurant fell silent. Forks clinked against plates. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes turned toward us, a mixture of curiosity and discomfort flickering across their faces. I stared at her, trying to process what had just happened. The woman standing before me was not the woman I had married, not the woman I had built a life with, shared dreams with, fought for. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had planned this. And yet even then, some pathetic part of me wanted to believe this was salvageable, that this was just another one of her power plays, another attempt to push me into a corner and make me beg. But I wasn't going to beg. Not this time. I reached for my keys, feeling the weight of them in my palm. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as I pushed my chair back, the legs screeching against the polished floor. I didn't say a word. Just turned and walked away. And as I stepped outside into the night, the cool air hitting my skin, I knew I wasn't just walking out of that restaurant. I was walking out of her life. The cold air hit me like a slap the moment I stepped outside. It was the kind of autumn night that carried a biting chill, the kind that crept into your bones and made you feel small under the weight of it. But I barely noticed. My mind was too busy replaying the last 10 minutes over and over, each second stretching longer than it had in real time. Listen or leave. The words still echoed in my head. She had said it so easily, like she had been rehearsing it for weeks. Maybe she had. Maybe to her, this was a performance, and I had played my part exactly as she had hoped. I tightened my grip on my car keys, my knuckles white against the metal. I should have felt something rage, sadness, regret, but all I felt was numb. I heard the restaurant door swing open behind me, the soft chime of the bell above it breaking the silence of the empty parking lot. For a brief moment, I thought it was her, that maybe, just maybe, she had come to her senses. That she would come running out after me, telling me she didn't mean it, that we could still fix this. But it wasn't her. It was just a couple there. Laughter cutting through the night like knives. They didn't even notice me as they passed by, caught up in their own little world, completely unaware that they had just witnessed the end of someone else's. I turned toward my car, unlocking it with a quick click of the fob. But instead of getting in, I just stood there, staring at my own reflection in the driver's side window. I looked hollow. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to this marriage, trying to keep things from crumbling, that I hadn't noticed how much of myself I had lost in the process. How long had it been since I felt happy, since I felt wanted, since I felt like I mattered? I exhaled sharply, pushing the thoughts away. This wasn't the time for that. Right now, I just needed to drive, needed to get away from the weight of that restaurant, from the eyes that had watched me walk out without a fight, from the feeling that I had already lost something long before tonight. Sliding into the driver's seat, I shut the door and gripped the steering wheel. My wedding ring glinted under the dim parking lot lights. It felt heavier than usual. Long time before finally pulling it off and setting it on the passenger seat, then, without looking back, I started the car and drove into the night. The engine hummed beneath my hands as I pulled onto the empty road, the headlights cutting through the darkness ahead. I wasn't sure where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. Not in that restaurant. Not in that moment. Not in the life I had built around a woman who had just humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers. The roads were familiar, yet somehow felt foreign. Streetlights cast long shadows against the pavement, making everything seem stretched and distorted. I loosened my grip on the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe, to focus on the rhythm of the tires against the asphalt, instead of the storm raging in my head. I had given her everything. Years of my life, my trust, my love. And in the end, all I got was an ultimatum. Listen or leave. She had wanted a reaction. That much was clear. Maybe she had expected me to argue, to fight, to plead with her in front of everyone? Maybe she had wanted to paint me as the unreasonable one, the one who couldn't handle the truth. But I had denied her that satisfaction. I had walked out, and now I had no idea what came next. The familiar buzz of my phone vibrating in the center console made me glance down. My heart clenched for a second before I even saw the name on the screen, Felicity. I let out a breath through my nose, my grip tightening again. I hesitated before picking it up, pressing the speaker button. "Where are you?" Her voice came through, sharp and impatient. No hint of remorse, no hesitation. I swallowed the bitter taste rising in my throat. "Not even. Are you okay?" "Driving." I kept my voice flat, distant. She scoffed. "Of course you are." A pause. "Are you coming back?" I blinked. Was she serious? After what she pulled, she actually expected me to just turn around, walk back in, and sit down like nothing happened? "No," I said simply. Silence, then a sigh. "Don't be dramatic." I almost laughed at that. I'm the one being dramatic. She was the one who turned our marriage into a performance, who made sure to air out our issues in front of an audience. And now she wanted to act like I was the one making a big deal out of it. "You gave me a choice, Felicity," I reminded her. "I made it." "You didn't even hear what I had to say," she snapped. I clenched my jaw. "You didn't give me a chance to." Another pause. I could hear the faint murmur of voices in the background, her friends maybe, or just the remnants of the restaurant. She was still there, probably still sitting at the table like nothing had happened, like I was just some inconvenience that had interrupted her night. "Look, let's just talk when you calm down," she said, as if I were the one who had caused a scene. "Come home." I stared at the road ahead, the streetlights flashing by one after another, and for the first time in a long time, I realized, I don't want to. "Not tonight," I told her. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then I heard the sharp exhale through her nose. "Fine," she muttered. "Suit yourself." Then the call ended. I let out a breath, setting the phone back down. The road stretched on ahead, of me, dark and open. And for the first time in years, I had no obligations, no expectations, just the choice to keep driving. I kept driving. The road stretching ahead of me like a blank page. There was no destination in my mind, just the need to move, to keep putting distance between myself and the mess I had left behind. The world outside the car felt eerily still. The streets were mostly empty, the glow of streetlights casting long warped shadows across the pavement. The occasional pair of headlights passed me, but for the most part, it was just me, the engine's hum, and the thoughts clawing at the inside of my skull. Felicity's voice still rang in my head, the way she had dismissed me, the way she had scoffed when I told her I wasn't coming back. "You're being dramatic." "No, Felicity, you're being delusional." Did she really think this was something we could just sweep under the rug? That I would come back home, sit across from her in the kitchen, and pretend she hadn't humiliated me in front of a room full of people, that she hadn't reduced our entire marriage to a public spectacle. It wasn't just about the ultimatum. It was everything that had come before it. The subtle shifts in her behavior, the way she had been treating me differently for months. I had ignored it, convinced myself that things would get better, that she was just going through something. But now, I was seeing it clearly for the first time. Felicity hadn't just crossed a line tonight. She had burned the whole damn thing down. I pulled into an empty gas station parking lot and cut the engine. The sudden silence was almost suffocating. I leaned back in my seat, rubbing my hands over my face, trying to process the wreckage of the last hour. Where did I even go from? Here. I reached for my phone, scrolling mindlessly through my contacts. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. A lifeline, maybe. Someone to tell me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't alone. My thumb hovered over one name for a long moment before I finally hit the call button. Ring. Twice before the voice on the other end picked up Elliot. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Hey man," I said, my voice hoarse. Elliot was one of the few people I could still trust. We had been friends since college, back when things were simpler. Before marriages and mortgages and the slow, creeping disappointments of adulthood, he had always been the rational one, the guy who could see through the BS and call things as they were. "You good?" he asked, his tone shifting immediately. Not really, I admitted. There was a beat of silence before he sighed. What did she do? That was the thing about Elliot. He never had to ask if something had happened. Just what? I swallowed hard. She gave me an ultimatum in front of a whole restaurant. His breath came out sharp. Are you serious? Dead serious? Listen or leave. That's what she said. A long pause. And you left? Yeah, I could hear the approval in his silence. Elliot had never been Felicity's biggest fan, though he had always kept it to himself. He never told me outright that she was bad for me, but he never told me I was lucky either. Where are you now? He asked. Some gas station. I just needed to drive. You need a place to crash? I hesitated, did I? The idea of going home, of stepping into that house and feeling the weight of what had happened made my chest tighten. Yeah, I said finally. That'd be good. Come over, I'll be up. I ended the call, gripping the steering wheel for a moment before starting the engine again. And as I pulled back onto the road, I realized something. I wasn't just avoiding home. I was avoiding her. The drive to Elliot's place felt longer than it should have. Maybe it was the weight of the night pressing down on me, or maybe it was because, for the first time in years, I had nowhere I had to be. I didn't belong to that house anymore. I didn't belong to Felicity anymore. That realization should have felt freeing, but all it did was leave a hollow ache in my chest. When I pulled into Elliot's driveway, the porch light was already on. His house had always been the opposite of mine, not just in size, but in the way it felt. It was lived in, warm, pictures on the walls. It's an old couch he refused to get rid of. Shelves stacked with books and records, a place that actually felt like home. The front door opened before I even knocked. Elliot stood there in his sweatpants and an old college hoodie, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything, just stepped aside to let me in. I walked past him, the familiar scent of coffee and old paper filling my lungs. For a second, it felt like we were back in our college apartment, crashing on each other's couches after long nights of bad decisions. But this wasn't college. This was my marriage falling apart. Elliot closed the door behind me. You look like hell. Thanks, I muttered. Dropping my keys onto the counter, he grabbed a bottle of whiskey off the shelf and poured 2 glasses, sliding one toward me. You want to talk about it? I stared at the drink. I wanted to, I needed to. But where did I even begin? I picked up the glass and took a sip, letting the burn settle in my throat before answering. She's been different for a while now. I started. Distant. Cold. I kept telling myself it was just stress, or that maybe I was imagining it. But tonight, it was like she wanted me to walk away. Elliot leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. She did it in public on purpose. She wanted people to see. That's not an accident. I exhaled through my nose. And that's what I keep. Thinking too. Silence stretched between us for a moment before he spoke again. Do you think there's someone else? The question hit me harder than it should have. It had been sitting in the back of my mind for months, whispering to me at night when I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I took another sip of whiskey before setting the glass down. I don't know. Elliot didn't press, but the look in his eyes told me he had already made up his own mind. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the exhaustion settle deep in my bones. I just don't get it, man. We used to be happy. I used to make her laugh, and now I can't even recognize her. Elliot sighed. People change. Sometimes they just don't change with you. I hated how much sense that made. You staying here tonight? He asked, changing the subject. Yeah, I said. Good, you need sleep. We'll figure out the rest later. He clapped a hand on my shoulder before grabbing a spare blanket from the hall closet and tossing it onto the couch. For what it's worth, he said as he turned to head to his room, I'm proud of you for leaving. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window and the faint smell of coffee drifting through the house. For a moment, I forgot where I was, my brain still sluggish from sleep. I expected to hear the rustling of Felicity moving around in the kitchen, the sound of her phone buzzing with notifications she never let me see. But then I remembered. Wasn't home. I wasn't hers anymore. I sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The couch had done a number on my back, but I'd slept harder than I had in months, maybe even years. There was something about knowing I didn't have to wake up and pretend that everything was fine. We're just going through a rough patch instead of spiraling toward the inevitable. I stood and stretched. Before making my way to the kitchen, where Elliot was already at the counter, pouring himself a second cup of coffee, he looked up when he saw me and wordlessly slid a mug across the counter. "You look like you got hit by a truck," he said, taking a sip. "I feel like I got hit by a truck," I muttered, picking up the coffee and leaning against the counter. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was something comforting about the quiet. No tension, no need to force a conversation, just two old friends existing in the same space. Finally, Elliot broke the silence. "You check your phone yet?" I tensed. No, I hadn't even thought about it. I reached for my pocket and pulled it out, my stomach twisting as I unlocked the screen. Sure enough, there were missed calls and texts from Felicity, a lot of them. Some were short and clipped. "You need to come home. You seriously ignoring me? We need to talk." And as the night dragged on, they shifted. "I can't believe you just left like that. Do you even care? You're being selfish." I clenched. My jaw. There it was. The same manipulation. The same twisted way of making everything my fault. She had humiliated me. She had pushed me away. And yet somehow I was the one being selfish. Elliot must have seen the look on my face because he raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" I exhaled sharply. Same old Felicity. I scrolled further down. Messages had taken another turn in the early morning hours. "I didn't mean for things to get like this. We should talk. Just us. No fighting." And then the last one, sent barely 30 minutes ago. "I'm sorry." I stared at the message. Something dark and unreadable curling in my chest. "She wants me to come home," I said. Elliot scoffed. "Of course she does. She didn't get the reaction she wanted last night. She's trying a different approach." I frowned. "But you think she's just playing games?" Elliot leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Look, man, I don't know what's going on in her head. But I do know that someone who truly cares about you doesn't humiliate you in public just to see how you'll react. And they definitely don't wait until after you leave to start apologizing." I let his words sink in, staring at my phone. Was she really sorry? Or was this just another way to control the situation? The thing was, part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that last night had been a mistake, that she hadn't meant to push me away like that. That maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call she needed. But another part of me, the part that had spent months feeling like a stranger in my own marriage, knew better. People don't just change overnight. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. I don't know what to do. Elliot studied me for a moment, before shaking his head. "Yeah, you do. You just don't want to admit it yet." And maybe he was right, because deep down, I already knew going back wasn't an option. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling the weight of every word Felicity had sent me. The apology, the guilt trip, the manipulation. It was all right there in black and white, but the worst part, small part of me still wanted to believe her. I hated that. I hated that after everything, after months of feeling like a ghost in my own marriage, I still felt the pull of obligation. The old instinct to smooth things over, to fix what was broken, even when I wasn't the one who had broken it. Elliot didn't say anything at first, just sipped his coffee and let me sit with the mess in my head. But eventually, he sighed. "Let me ask you something. If you go back, what changes?" I exhaled slowly, pressing the bridge of my nose between my fingers. "I don't know, yeah, you do." I looked up at him, and he met my stare with the same quiet patience he'd had since college. The same look he always gave me when he was waiting for me to admit something I wasn't ready to say out loud. "Nothing changes," I said finally. And there it was, the truth that had been clawing at me all night. Nothing would change because this wasn't some random mistake. This wasn't an argument that had gotten out of hand. This was who she was now. She had planned that moment in the restaurant. She had wanted to corner me, to humiliate me, to force me into a position where I either bent to her will or made myself look like the villain. She hadn't expected me to leave. That's why she was scrambling now, sending me texts she probably didn't even mean. She wanted control, and the second I walked back through that door, she'd have it again. Elliot leaned against the counter, watching as the realization settled over me. So, what's the move? I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth ground me before answering. I need to go home, I said. Elliot frowned. To what end? To get my stuff. For the first time since last night, saying the words out loud felt right. I wasn't going home to fix things. I wasn't going home to fight. I was going home to leave. On the drive back, the road looked different in the morning light, less eerie than it had the night before. But the weight in my chest hadn't lifted. If anything, it had gotten heavier. I hadn't seen Felicity since the restaurant, hadn't heard her voice outside of the texts she had sent. But as I pulled onto our street, a sick feeling curled in my gut. What if she was waiting? What if she wasn't alone? I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing myself to push the thoughts away. It didn't matter. Nothing she said or did was going to change my mind. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. It was strange how a place that had once felt like home now felt like enemy territory. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. The front door was unlocked. That alone told me she had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, the air thick with something unspoken. The house was quiet, but not in a peaceful way, more like the kind of quiet that listened. And then there she was. Felicity stood in the living room, arms crossed, looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was a mess, her eyes slightly puffy, but the moment she saw me, her expression hardened. Finally decided to come back, she said. I ignored the jab. I'm here to get my things. Her face barely flickered, but I caught the quick flash of panic before she masked it with indifference. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not. I walked past her, heading straight for the bedroom. Behind me, I heard her footsteps as she followed, her voice sharp with frustration. So that's it? One argument, and you're just leaving? I let out a short, humorless laugh. One argument? I turned to face her, shaking my head. Felicity, you've been pushing me away for months. Last night wasn't the beginning. It was the end. Her jaw clenched. You're overreacting. No, I'm finally reacting. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. Felicity stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. You're making a mistake, she tried again, her voice softer this time. I didn't even look at her. No, I made the mistake of staying this long. Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, is there someone else? That made me stop. I turned to her, staring in disbelief. Are you serious? She held my gaze, something unreadable in her expression. There's no one else, Felicity, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm leaving because of you. She flinched, just barely, but I caught it. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then finally, in a voice so quiet, I almost didn't hear it. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I exhaled, shaking my head. Yeah, I figured. I zipped up my bag and walked past her without another word. I didn't owe her any more explanations. I didn't owe her anything at all. Walking out of that house for the last time should have felt like freedom. It should have felt like I had just cut the last thread tying me to something toxic. But as I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty. The weight in my chest hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had settled deeper, like an anchor dragging me down. Even though I knew I was making the right decision, it didn't erase the years I had spent loving her. It didn't erase the nights we had stayed up talking, the trips we had taken, the times when I had looked at her and thought, this is it. This is my person. But that person was gone, or maybe she had never been real in the first place. I reached my car and tossed my duffel bag into the back seat, my hands gripping the edge of the door as I stared down at the pavement. This was it. No more waiting for things to change. No more trying to fix what had been broken for too long. I got into the driver's seat, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. My wedding ring was still sitting in the cup holder where I had left it the night before. I picked it up, turning it over in my palm. It felt heavy, too heavy. With one last deep breath, I rolled down the window and flicked the ring into the bushes, and then I drove away, starting over. I didn't go back to Elliot's place. Instead, I just drove. City blurred past me, the buildings and streetlights blending together as I tried to process what had just happened. I had left my wife, my home, my entire life as I had known it. And now, for the first time in years, I had no idea what came next. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even know where I was going to sleep tonight. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. The idea of a hotel crossed my mind, but the thought of being alone in a silent room with nothing but my thoughts made my stomach twist. Instead, I pulled into a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place that still had faded vinyl booths, and waitresses who called you honey. The bell over the door chimed as I stepped inside. The place was nearly empty, save for a couple of truckers at the counter and an older couple sharing a slice of pie in the corner. I slid into a booth and rubbed my hands over my face, exhaustion hitting me all at once. The waitress walked over, her notepad already in hand. "Rough night?" she asked, eyeing me with something between sympathy and amusement. I huffed a tired laugh. "You could say that." She nodded as if she had seen 1,000 men in this exact position before. "Coffee, please?" She disappeared behind the counter, and I stared out the window, watching the headlights of passing cars flash by. I wondered if Felicity was home right now, pacing the living room, thinking about what she had done. Or maybe she wasn't thinking about me at all. Maybe she had already convinced herself that I was the bad guy in all of this, that I had abandoned her. That was the thing about people like Felicity. They never saw themselves as the problem. "Here you go, honey," the waitress said, setting the steaming cup in front of me. "You need anything else?" I thought about it for a second before shaking my head. "Just the coffee." She gave me a knowing smile before walking away. Let my hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into my fingers as I stared down into the dark liquid. I should have felt lost, but for the first time in a long time, felt found. Epilogue. The call I didn't expect. I don't know how long I sat there, drinking coffee and letting the world move on around me. Time felt strange, like it didn't quite belong to me yet. But then my phone rang. I glanced down at the screen, expecting to see Felicity's name again, but it wasn't her. It was someone else, someone I hadn't heard from in a long, long time. I hesitated for a second before answering. "Hello?" A pause, then a voice I never thought I'd hear again. "Hey, it's been a while." And just like that, everything changed. Hesitated for a moment before pressing the phone to my ear. The voice on the other end was familiar, unexpected, but familiar. "Hey, it's been a while." I couldn't place it, but then, like a puzzle piece snapping into place, I knew exactly who it was. Emily. She had been a part of my life long before Felicity, before the mess, before I became the version of myself that settled for less than I deserved. We had lost touch years ago. Life had pulled us in different directions, as it often does. But now here she was, calling me out of nowhere, as if the universe had decided I needed a reminder that life wasn't over. "Emily," I said, still processing the moment. "Wow, ... Yeah, it's been a while." She let out a soft chuckle. "I wasn't sure if you'd still have the same number. I wasn't sure anyone still remembered it." She paused, then her tone softened. "Elliot told me what happened." Of course, Elliot. He had always been the type to pull strings behind the scenes, making sure the people he cared about didn't fall apart in isolation. "Yeah," I exhaled, rubbing my temple. "It's been a hell of a 24 hours, I figured. That's why I called." There was something comforting about her voice. It wasn't laced with pity, just understanding. She wasn't trying to fix me, just letting me know that I wasn't alone. "I appreciate it," I said, meaning it more than I expected. A brief silence hung between us, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that only existed between people who didn't need to fill every second with words. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Come see me." I blinked. "What?" "I'm serious. You've been driving all night anyway, right? Come. Crash here for a bit. Get some space. Clear your head." I opened my mouth to argue, to say it was too soon, that I wasn't sure what I was even doing yet. But then I stopped myself. What was I holding on to? The life I had left behind? The house that wasn't a home anymore? The woman who had made me feel like I wasn't enough for months? Or Emily was offering me something Felicity never did, a choice, a real one. "Where are you these days?" I asked. About 3 hours south. Not too far. And I make a mean cup of coffee in case that helps. I laughed. An actual, real laugh. The kind that I hadn't felt in a long time. That does help, she chuckled. Then, what are you waiting for? I glanced at my reflection in the diner window, the tired eyes, the weight I had been carrying for months. And then, for the first time in a long time, I felt light. I'm on my way. I hung up, tossed some cash on the counter, and stepped outside. The sun was rising, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. As I slid into my car and started,